Kyle is a wealthy young man, pampered and arrogant, believing that good looks are the ultimate power. Although Tal hoped to be elected as the new Green Party chairman by his classmates, Kendra, watching from the audience, saw him as nothing more than a boastful heir. What Kendra didn't know was that Kyle's direct reason for participating in the election was to gain his father's attention. However, Kyle's father was always busy and only gave his son a few perfunctory compliments. Due to Kyle's wealth and good looks, he was quickly elected as the Green Party chairman and enthusiastically invited Kendra to attend the celebration party that evening. However, upon attending as promised, Kendra soon realized that Kyle was not warmly welcoming him, but rather took the opportunity to humiliate him for the scar on his face. Upon hearing this, Kendra murmured a few words, and Kyle suddenly felt a wave of dizziness. It turned out that Kendra's reputation as a witch was no joke. She had long been displeased with Kyle's arrogant demeanor, and, realizing that he only used looks to humiliate others, she cast a curse on him. Before leaving the party, Kendra warned Kyle that if he could not receive a heartfelt confession from a girl within a year, he would live forever with an ugly appearance. Looking into the mirror, Kyle was immediately startled. At that moment, his body was covered with scars like Jenny's, and he looked as hideous as a monster. Devastated, he returned home in despair. But when he told his father about it, his father took him straight to see a doctor and stated that as long as he could be restored to his original appearance, he was willing to take any risk. Upon hearing this, Kyle left the hospital in a fit of anger. To keep this matter hidden from the public, Kyle's father immediately found an apartment for his son and, under the guise of concern, placed Kyle under house arrest. During the 5 months of losing his handsome appearance, Kyle was depressed all day long. His father no longer visited him at the apartment, but instead hired a blind teacher named William. However, for Kyle, his father's actions only made him feel more despondent. Realizing that his father would not come to see him again, Kyle rode his motorcycle into a Halloween party on the street. At that moment, Kendra was dancing in the crowd, and upon seeing this, Kyle immediately approached her to ask her to lift the curse. But from Kendra's perspective, who just wanted to celebrate, Kyle had not learned any lessons at all, so she warned him to carefully make use of the remaining 7 months. As Kendra left, Kyle saw his former girlfriend, who used to be completely obedient to him, at the party. But now his girlfriend had already cheated on him, and the person she cheated with was Kyle's friend. Learning all this made Kyle very upset. But he unexpectedly saw Lindy, and this quirky girl who worked for the school newspaper surprisingly made his heart flutter. Especially the things Lindy said, which resonated deeply with Kyle at that moment. The next day, Kyle woke up on the cold floor. Although he still hadn't received a call from his father, he noticed that the boisterous William was actually throwing darts. From the optimistic William's perspective, not all girls care so much about appearances. What Kyle needed to do was open his heart and become a man whose inner qualities outweigh his looks. William's words made Kyle start to rethink his life, right? And during this reflection, Kyle saw the photo taken by Lindy when she interviewed him back then. So Kyle found Lindy's residence based on the information on the webpage, but to avoid scaring her, he kept his distance and did not approach. After observing for several days, Kyle discovered that Lindy was not only a charming and artistic young woman but also frequently helped the homeless in the area with her friends. In this way, the optimistic and cheerful Lindy quietly made her way into Kyle's heart. But one day, Kyle discovered that Lindy's father was cornered in an alley by thugs demanding repayment of a loan shark debt. To save Lindy, who was being attacked, Kyle immediately stepped in and carried the unconscious Lindy back to the apartment. But then he heard gunshots and discovered that Lindy's father had accidentally killed one of the thugs. The other thug, who fled, threatened that Lindy would pay with her life. Kyle quickly took photos of the crime scene and used them to threaten the man into entrusting his daughter to Kyle's protection. In a panic, Lindy's father had no choice but to agree to his suggestion. The next day, Lindy's father sent his daughter to Kyle's apartment. However, Lindy, who was thus placed under house arrest, was very angry. She locked herself in the attic and refused to say a word to Kyle, who had changed his name to Hunter. To win Lindy's favor, Kyle bought expensive bags and jewelry. But to Lindy, who had lost her education and family, these meant little. They were nothing more than boring luxury items. By chance, Kyle learned that Lindy had always hoped to return to school and fulfill her previous dream of traveling. Although he couldn't help Lindy realize her dream at the moment, he fabricated a lie, claiming that everything Lindy's father did was just to protect her. Thus, Lindy, half believing, accepted Kyle's goodwill. This gave Kyle a renewed sense of hope. Additionally, inspired, Kyle began writing letters to Lindy. And he even wanted to build a garden for her. Lindy also met with William and the housekeeper at home. Upon learning that Kyle wanted to build a garden on the rooftop, Lindy thought it was just a joke, but Kyle had already prepared the materials and started working on it. Through the small skylight, Lindy caught a glimpse of Kyle's figure moving back and forth. Just before Christmas arrived, Lindy finally caught Kyle, who didn't have time to hide. After a pleasant conversation, Kyle mustered the courage for the first time to let Lindy see his face. To Kyle's surprise, there was no fear on Lindy's face. Her acceptance and the smile that appeared on her face filled Kyle with immense joy. Afterwards, Kyle brought Lindy to the greenhouse he had meticulously built, and the room full of blooming flowers immediately touched the girl's heart. The two young people began to read poetry and communicate in this beautiful place. But just as Kyle was making some progress, he discovered that the withered wood on his arm had unexpectedly bloomed with white flowers. This also signaled that the one-year deadline was approaching. In a panic, Kyle once again sought out Kendra, hoping she could give him more time. However, for Kendra, the curse she cast could not be altered, so she hoped Kyle would seize the time to win his beloved's true heart. After learning about Kyle's other wishes, Kendra also stated that as long as Kyle could succeed, she would also help the blind William and the housekeeper who was forced to be separated from her children. That night, Kyle went to Lindy's room and found her looking through their old photos together. It was then that he learned Lindy had secretly had a crush on him all along. Since Lindy didn't know that Hunter was actually Kyle, Kyle didn't reveal the truth, but instead took her to the zoo. By this time, Kyle had completely opened his heart and shared his most secret memories from deep within his heart with Lindy. The two young people talked through the night. As the night passed, Lindy fell asleep, leaning on Kyle. Although the withered wood on Kyle's arm was about to bloom with flowers, but he still hoped that Lindy could be happy and content, even willing to let him go on a journey. Upon hearing this, William and the housekeeper suggested that he take Lindy to the estate Kyle's father had purchased. This would not only allow Lindy to relax, but also give Kyle the opportunity to get closer to Lindy's heart. By the beautiful lakeside, Kyle handed over the letters he had written over the past few days to Lindy. But just as he was about to confess to Lindy suddenly received a call from the hospital and learned that his father was critically ill. Seeing this, Kyle immediately drove Lindy to the train station. However, before getting on the train, Lindy's words calling him a good friend deeply hurt Kyle, and he hid in his greenhouse, refusing to communicate with anyone, and even ignored Lindy's calls. Worried about him, Lindy, unable to get a response from Kyle, could only proceed with his long-awaited graduation trip as planned after bidding farewell to his father. Upon learning of this, William and the housekeeper once again encouraged Kyle not to let this hard-won happiness slip away. So Kyle immediately rushed to the school, hoping to make a final effort before the deadline. As soon as Kyle appeared at the school, he noticed that everyone was looking at him. Even so, he mustered the courage to stop Lindy. After hearing Kyle's confession, Lindy, ignoring the strange looks from others, directly kissed Kyle. However, the deadline had already passed, and Kyle completely lost the chance to return to his original state. Just before he sent Lindy onto the bus, Lindy suddenly confessed to him. Having finally received love, Kyle was at peace with this outcome. But just as he stepped out the door, he felt a blur in front of his eyes. When he looked at his reflection in the glass again, he found that he had returned to his handsome appearance. At this moment, Lindy suddenly ran out, and Kyle hurriedly explained the magical curse that had happened to him. As Lindy made a phone call, he realized that Kyle was actually Hunter, the person he had fallen in love with, and the two immediately embraced and kissed. In the end, Kendra fulfilled her promise. She not only restored William's sight, but also helped the housekeeper's children obtain green cards. However, Kendra's mission was not over. With a new plan, she applied to Kyle's father's company and prepared to use her magical powers once again. Alright, that's it for today's explanation. If you like my video, please don't forget to like and comment. See you tomorrow.